Two 5-year-old girls shared their last sandwich with a man they thought was homeless. They didn't know he was a billionaire. They didn't know kindness could cost them their home. One quiet sentence changed a life, a system, and what it truly means to be seen when hope almost disappeared. Morning in Seabrook Row arrived softly, like it didn't want to wake anyone who was already tired. Maris Hart stood in the narrow kitchen of her third-floor walk-up, spreading peanut butter carefully, as if using too much would break something fragile. The bread was thin. The jar was nearly empty. At the table, her 5-year-old twins waited. Ivy sat straight, hands folded, watching every movement. She noticed things: how long the knife paused, how Maris scraped the last bit from the jar. Ivy always noticed. Luna, meanwhile, swung her legs under the chair, humming a song she had made up on the spot. She didn't notice the jar. She noticed feelings. Maris cut the sandwich into 2 small hearts and placed them in a paper bag. "That's it?" Luna asked, tilting her head. Maris smiled, calm and steady. "That's enough." Outside, the air was sharp. Maris walked the girls to the bus stop, holding their hands, never letting go. On the corner bench sat a man wrapped in a worn coat, shoulders, trembling eyes fixed on nothing. Luna slowed. Ivy stopped completely. The man looked up, startled not by fear, but by being seen. Ivy reached into the bag. Her movements were careful, deliberate. She pulled out one heart-shaped piece and held it out with both hands. "It's my last piece," she said quietly. The man shook his head. "You should keep it." Luna stepped forward, pressed her half into Ivy's hand, then pushed both pieces toward him. She looked up at him and said very simply, "We can be hungry together." The words landed heavier than the cold. The man accepted the sandwich, hands unsteady. His eyes shone not with tears, but recognition. Maris inhaled sharply, then steadied herself. The bus arrived. As the doors closed, the man watched the girls disappear down the street. And for the first time in years, something inside him cracked open. That night, the same man stood alone in a glass-walled penthouse overlooking Crown Harbor. The coat lay discarded on a chair. The grime washed away, the beard gone. He was Gideon Vale, founder of Vale Meridian, Billionaire, untouchable by most definitions of the word. But alone, untouched, was the last thing he felt. His assistant, Nolan Pierce, scrolled through a tablet. 3 weeks undercover, he said. People gave money, some crossed the street. Almost no one spoke. Gideon didn't answer. He was staring at the sandwich wrapper he'd kept smoothed flat on the counter like evidence. "And today?" Nolan asked quietly. Gideon's voice was low. 2 children shared food they didn't have to spare. Nolan paused. 5 years old. Twins. Their mother stayed close. Protective. No pressure. Gideon closed his eyes. A hospital room surfaced in his mind. A smaller bed. A smaller hand slipping from his grasp years ago. His daughter. Saffron. "She didn't ask who I was." Gideon said. "She didn't ask why I was there." He swallowed. "She just decided I mattered." Nolan set the tablet down. "What do you want to do?" Gideon opened his eyes. The city lights reflected in them, cold, distant, expensive. "Find them," he said. Quietly, lawfully, no spectacle. Nolan nodded. And then Gideon picked up the wrapper, folded it once carefully. "Then we don't rescue them," he said. "We protect them." He turned toward the window. The image of 2 small girls burned into his mind, not as charity cases, but as mirrors. For the first time since his loss, Gideon Vale didn't feel rich. He felt responsible. Maris Hart's life ran on numbers she never said out loud. Hours per shift. Days until rent. Dollars left after groceries. She did the math silently, the way some people prayed. At Crown Harbor General, she moved with practiced calm, steady hands, soft voice, never rushing a patient who needed reassurance. She gave care like it was oxygen. At home, Ivy lined up crayons by color. Luna narrated everything she did, including brushing her teeth. That evening, the phone rang while pasta boiled. "Ms. Hart," a man said, professional but warm. "My name is Nolan Pierce. I represent the Saffron Star Foundation." Maris didn't sit down. "Go on." "We'd like to discuss an educational opportunity for your daughters," Nolan continued, "and a professional opportunity for you." Maris glanced at the twins. Ivy was watching her face. Luna was watching her hands. "Why us?" Maris asked. A pause, brief, respectful. "Because an observer witnessed something rare," Nolan said. "Compassion without calculation." Maris closed her eyes for half a second. "I'll need credentials," she said. "Full transparency. And I decide if we meet." "Of course," Nolan replied. "That's exactly what we hoped." She hung up. Luna looked up first. "Mommy, did we do something?" Maris knelt, eye-level, steady hands on small shoulders. "You did something kind." Ivy's voice was barely above a whisper. "Was it wrong?" Maris shook her head immediately. "No, never wrong." But later that night, when she turned off the light, Maris stared at the ceiling, eviction rumors echoing in her mind. Kindness didn't pay rent. But it did something else. It opened doors no one had planned for. The knock came at exactly 7:30 p.m. Maris noticed the timing first. Precise knocks usually meant institutions, not neighbors. She opened the door just enough to see a man in a tailored coat holding a leather folder. His posture was polite, practiced. Not threatening. Not casual either. "Ms. Hart," he said. "Nolan Pierce. Thank you for agreeing to meet." Maris didn't step aside immediately. She stayed in the doorway, one hand resting lightly behind her, where Ivy and Luna stood, half-hidden, curious eyes peeking out. Nolan noticed. He lowered himself slightly, not kneeling, but softening his presence. "I won't take much of your time," he said. "And if at any point you want me to leave, I will." That mattered. Inside, the apartment felt smaller with a stranger in it. Nolan didn't comment on the worn couch or the patched curtains. He sat only when invited. "I'm here on behalf of the Saffron Star Foundation," he began. "3 days ago, an observer witnessed your daughters sharing their lunch with a man who appeared to be homeless." Maris felt her chest tighten. She turned slowly toward the girls. "Is that why you were so quiet after school?" Luna nodded. Ivy stared at the floor. "They were kind," Maris said carefully. "That's all." And that, Nolan replied gently, "is why we're here." He slid the folder forward but didn't open it yet. "The foundation would like to offer your daughters access to an early enrichment program, character-based, age-appropriate, fully supervised. And we'd like to discuss a senior nursing role for you within our healthcare initiatives." Silence filled the room. Luna broke it. "Are we in trouble?" Nolan shook his head immediately. "No, sweetheart. Not at all." Maris watched him closely. "Why them?" Nolan hesitated, not long enough to be evasive, but long enough to be honest. "Because most people give when it's easy," he said. "Your daughters gave when it wasn't." Maris leaned back, arms crossing, not defensive, but firm. "I don't want my children thinking they have to give things away to be noticed," she said quietly. Nolan nodded. "Nor do we." Ivy didn't look up. She heard only one thing to be noticed. After Nolan left, the apartment felt too quiet. Maris washed the dishes, slowly, giving herself time to think. She replayed the conversation, every word measured, every offer clean but still heavy. Behind her, Ivy sat at the table, hands folded exactly the way she did when she felt unsure. Luna colored without looking at the page. Mom, Luna asked. "Did we do it wrong?" Maris turned immediately. "No. Never." But Ivy didn't move. Later that night, Maris spoke softly on the phone in the kitchen, thinking the girls were asleep. "I just don't want them believing kindness is a transaction," she said to no one in particular. "They're 5. They don't need that weight." Ivy stood in the hallway unseen. She didn't hear reassurance. She heard weight. The next morning, Ivy left half her breakfast untouched. Luna noticed. You don't like toast now. Ivy shook her head. I don't want to do it wrong again. Luna frowned. Wrong how Ivy shrugged, eyes shiny but steady. If you give too much, people come. That afternoon at kindergarten, Ivy didn't share her crayons. She watched other children closely measuring. Luna, confused, offered her sticker to a classmate anyway. At work, Maris couldn't shake the image of Ivy's untouched plate. That evening, she knelt in front of her daughters. Listen to me, she said, voice steady but urgent. Kindness is not a rule. It's a choice. You never owe it to anyone. Ivy finally looked up. What if I choose wrong? Maris pulled her close. Then I'll be right there. Ivy exhaled for the first time all day. But somewhere across the city, Gideon Vale stared at a report Nolan had sent, quiet concern replacing gratitude. Something fragile had shifted. And he realized help, if done poorly, could harm the very thing it meant to honor. The second meeting didn't happen at the apartment. It happened in a small conference room at the foundation, glass walls, soft light, no logos on the table. Maris arrived holding both girls' hands. The man waiting inside stood when they entered. He wasn't wearing the coat, but Ivy recognized the eyes immediately. Her breath caught. That's him, she whispered. The man knelt, not theatrically, just enough to meet them at eye level. Hello, Ivy, he said gently. Hello, Luna. Luna blinked. You're not cold. He smiled. Not today. Maris felt the shift instantly. You were the man on the bench. Yes, he said. My name is Gideon Vale. Silence settled, thick but calm. I owe you an explanation, Gideon continued, voice measured. I was living undercover to understand how people treat those they think don't matter. Ivy's voice was small but steady. Did we do it wrong? The question landed hard. Gideon turned fully toward her. No, he said without hesitation. You did it right. Maris watched closely. No savior tone, no guilt. I don't want your kindness to cost you, Gideon said. That's why any help we offer is optional. Structured, safe. He slid documents across the table, not toward the girls, but toward Maris. She read carefully. Scholarships later, programs now, a job that matched her qualifications. No publicity, no obligation. You're not our project, Gideon said. You're our partners if you choose to be. Maris met his eyes. And if we say no, then I'll still be grateful, he replied. And I'll leave. Luna leaned toward Ivy and whispered, He's nicer without the coat. Ivy almost smiled. Maris closed the folder. We'll think about it, she said. Gideon nodded. That's all I hoped for. As they left, Ivy looked back once. For the first time since the bus stop, she felt sure of one thing: her kindness had not been a mistake. Brightwell Academy didn't look like a school to Ivy and Luna. It looked like a storybook castle that had learned how to stay quiet. Tall brick walls, clean windows, parents in neat coats speaking softly, as if loud voices didn't belong here. Maris noticed everything, the way security smiled politely, but checked badges twice, the way conversations paused when the twins walked past. Ivy squeezed Maris's hand, not out of fear, out of awareness. Luna, on the other hand, tilted her head and whispered. Why is everyone whispering? Maris smiled. Some places forget how to breathe. Inside the classroom, Ms. Rowan Hale knelt to greet the twins, her smile warm and unmeasured. You must be Ivy and Luna, she said. We're very glad you're here. That mattered too. During circle time, Ivy sat straight, hands folded. Luna raised her hand for everything: questions, answers, ideas that wandered happily off track. When snack time came, children opened carefully packed containers. Ivy unwrapped her apple slices slowly. She waited. The boy next to her dropped a cracker. He stared at it like it was gone forever. Ivy hesitated. Her fingers curled, then stopped. Luna leaned over and whispered, not quietly enough, not carefully enough. Mom says we don't owe kindness, but we can still choose it. Ivy looked at the cracker. She slid one apple slice over. The boy smiled. A real one. Across the room, a parent volunteer stiffened slightly, watching. Later that afternoon, Maris received her first polite email from the school. Just a note, we're monitoring adjustment closely. New environments can be complex. Maris read it twice. Complex didn't mean concern. It meant difference. That night, Ivy lined up her shoes by size, smallest to biggest. Did I do okay today? She asked. Maris sat beside her. You did beautifully. Ivy nodded, but her eyes drifted toward the window. Brightwell Academy was beautiful, but Ivy could already tell it wasn't built with people like them in mind. At the Saffron Star Foundation, Maris's new office was small but bright. She liked that. Dr. Amara Sato, head of healthcare initiatives, spoke plainly. We don't need perfection. We need honesty. Maris exhaled. They talked about mobile clinics, preventative care, families who delayed treatment not from neglect, but from fear, cost, confusion. This, Maris said softly, is what I've been doing already, just without resources. Dr. Sato smiled. Now you'll have them. The first meeting with the board felt colder. Grant Wycliffe sat with his hands folded, expression, polite eyes assessing. These community-focused approaches, he said, can be emotionally compelling. But we must consider optics. Maris didn't flinch. People aren't optics. A few heads turned. Grant smiled thinly. Of course, I meant sustainability. That word again. At Brightwell, sustainability looked different. A week in Maris was called in for a casual conversation. Dr. Celeste Ashford sat behind a pristine desk, voice smooth. Your daughters are delightful, she said, but their initiatives have raised questions. Initiatives, Maris asked calmly. Encouraging other children to share food, organizing thank you cards for staff. It's sweet, but some families prefer structured channels. Maris nodded slowly. Are they breaking rules? No, Dr. Ashford said. Just norms. That night, Ivy didn't mention school. Luna did. They told me not to pass things during snack, she said. Because it's messy. Ivy stared at her plate. Messy isn't bad, Luna added. It just scares people. Maris watched her daughters closely. The world wasn't unkind, but it was uncomfortable with goodness that didn't ask permission. And discomfort, Maris knew, often came before resistance. The pressure didn't arrive loudly. It arrived in pauses, in smiles that ended too quickly, in invitations that didn't come. At Brightwell, Ivy became quieter. She followed rules perfectly, too perfectly. Luna, however, remained Luna. During a class discussion about community helpers, Luna raised her hand. My mom helps people who don't know how to ask, she said. And my sister helps people who drop crackers. A few children laughed. Not unkindly. Just unsure. Ms. Rowan smiled. That's a beautiful way to put it. That afternoon, Maris received another email. Perhaps we can guide the girls toward more age-appropriate expressions of generosity. Maris closed her laptop slowly. That evening, as rain tapped softly against the window, Ivy asked a question she'd been holding all week. Mom, are we too different? Maris opened her mouth to answer. Luna beat her to it. No, she said firmly. They're just not used to us yet. Ivy blinked. How do you know? Luna shrugged. Because they keep watching. Maris felt something twist in her chest. Not fear, not anger. Resolve. Across the city, Gideon Vale read updates from Nolan and frowned. They're uncomfortable, Nolan said. Not hostile, just resistant. Gideon nodded slowly. Then we don't push. We protect. But what if the school escalates? Gideon's voice hardened not with threat, but clarity. Then we remind them, he said, that character is not a liability. That night, Ivy taped a small drawing to the fridge. 2 stick figures, one taller, one smaller. Above them, uneven letters, we can stand here too. Maris kissed her forehead. The storm outside passed quietly. But something else was gathering, not danger, not harm change. The meeting invitation arrived without urgency. A brief alignment discussion, the email read. No subject, no warning. Just a time that assumed compliance. Maris arrived 10 minutes early. Dr. Celeste Ashford sat behind her desk as if the room itself answered to her posture. The window behind her framed Brightwell's courtyard, orderly, trimmed, beautiful, in a way that didn't invite questions. "Miss Hart," she said pleasantly. "Thank you for coming." Maris sat. "You mentioned alignment." "Yes." Dr. Ashford folded her hands. "Your daughters are academically on track. Socially, they're influential." Maris waited. "They inspire behaviors," Dr. Ashford continued, "that aren't always consistent with our culture. Food sharing, initiatives, unprompted acts. Are those behaviors harmful?" Maris asked calmly. "No," Dr. Ashford replied. "But they are disruptive." The word landed between them like a paperweight. Disruptive to what Maris asked. Dr. Ashford smiled. "To expectations." Maris nodded slowly. "My daughters are 5. Precisely," Dr. Ashford said. "At this age, guidance is essential. We would prefer generosity to be expressed through structured programs, approved channels. It reassures families." Maris leaned back, measuring her breath. "My daughters don't organize programs. They notice people." Dr. Ashford's smile thinned. Notice can become performance. Maris's voice remained steady. "Only if adults turn it into one." Silence. Finally, Dr. Ashford slid a document forward. "We'll be observing more closely." "For everyone's comfort." Maris stood. "If there's a rule, please send it. If not, I trust my daughters will continue being themselves." Dr. Ashford rose as well, the meeting ending without permission being granted. Outside, Ivy waited on a bench, shoes dangling. Luna traced shapes on the stone with her finger. "How was it?" Luna asked. Maris knelt. "Quiet." Ivy looked up. "Quiet means loud later." Maris smiled sadly. "Sometimes." They walked away together, the school's bell echoing behind them, not as a warning, but as a reminder. Some systems fear kindness they can't control. The boardroom at the Saffron Star Foundation was designed to impress restraint. Glass, steel, silence. Maris stood at the screen, her presentation paused on a map of underserved neighborhoods, small dots glowing where mobile clinics could change lives. "We don't need more buildings," she said. "We need access." Grant Wycliffe tapped his pen. "Access is admirable, but donors prefer visibility." Maris met his gaze. "Patients prefer care." A murmur moved through the room. Grant smiled politely. "Emotion is compelling. Sustainability is essential." Maris nodded. "That's why this plan is cost-effective, measurable, and lawful." She clicked forward, data outcomes timelines. No theatrics, no pity. Dr. Amara Sato leaned forward. "This is strong." Grant exhaled slowly. "I'm concerned about brand dilution." Nadine Kessler spoke for the first time. "I'm concerned about relevance." The room stilled. "This foundation was born from loss," Nadine continued, "from seeing too late. Ms. Hart's proposal ensures we see sooner." Grant's jaw tightened. The vote was postponed. Not a rejection, not approval, a delay. After the meeting, Grant caught Maris in the hall. "You're effective," he said. "But be careful. Influence invites resistance." Maris replied gently, "So does silence." Across town, Ivy sat at the kitchen table, coloring the same page over and over. Luna noticed. "Why do you keep using blue?" Ivy shrugged. "It's the safest." Luna considered that. Safe isn't always happy. That evening, Gideon Vale visited without notice. He sat at the small table listening as Maris described the school meeting and the board's hesitation. "They're afraid," Gideon said quietly. "Of what?" Maris asked. "Of losing control over the story," he replied. "Kindness doesn't need permission." Ivy looked up. "Are we in trouble again?" Gideon turned to her fully. No, you're teaching adults how to listen. Ivy nodded, unsure but comforted. As Gideon left, he paused at the door. Thank you, he said to Maris, for not making this easy. She understood what he meant. Easy help rarely lasts. The envelope was thin. Maris knew what that meant before she opened it. Notice of renovation and vacancy. 60 days. Legal language. Neutral tone. No accusation. Just inevitability dressed as progress. She folded the paper carefully. Once, twice, too neatly. Luna watched from the doorway. Is that a letter or a rule? Maris forced a smile. A letter. Ivy studied her mother's hands. Letters don't make you breathe like that. Maris sat down. She didn't rush. She didn't dramatize. We'll need to move, she said gently. Luna blinked. Because we shared, the question sliced through the room. Maris paused, not because she didn't know the answer, but because she wanted the truth to be gentle. No, sweetheart, she said. We're moving because buildings change. Ivy frowned. Does kindness protect houses? Maris shook her head. No, but it protects people. That night, Maris stood by the window long after the girls were asleep, the folded paper heavy in her pocket. Her phone buzzed. Gideon. She told him everything. He didn't interrupt. When she finished, he spoke carefully. I have an option, he said. A secure apartment, through the foundation. Lawful, no pressure. Maris closed her eyes. I don't want rescue, I know, Gideon replied. That's why I'm asking, not deciding. After the call, Ivy padded into the room, clutching her blanket. Mom, she whispered, if we have to go, can we still stand together? Maris knelt and held her tight. Always. Across the city, Gideon stared at the skyline, the folded sandwich wrapper still tucked in his desk drawer. Change was coming, not as punishment, but as a test of whether systems could bend without breaking the people inside them. The building changed its sound after the notices arrived. Doors closed softer. Footsteps hesitated. Conversations dropped into whispers that didn't want to be overheard by Hope. Maris felt it the moment she stepped into the stairwell, an invisible weight pressing down, not from fear, but from uncertainty dressed as patience. She kept routines steady, breakfast at the same time, shoes lined up by the door, jackets zipped with the same calm hands. Ivy noticed everything. Luna noticed the pauses. That night, the girls sat at the table drawing. Ivy drew houses, careful squares with windows evenly spaced. Luna drew people, big circles for heads, arms stretching out like bridges. Mom, Luna said, without looking up. Where do houses go when people leave them? Maris breathed in slowly. Sometimes houses wait, sometimes they change. Do they miss us? Luna asked. Ivy stopped drawing. Maris knelt between them. Houses don't feel the way people do. People carry home with them. Ivy's voice was small but firm. Then I'll carry it for Luna. The words landed quietly like a promise that didn't know it was heavy. Later, after the girls were asleep, Maris sat at the kitchen table with the folded notice and her phone. She had already called every number listed. Legal, polite. Final. Renovations were progress. Progress displaced gently, efficiently, without raised voices. Her phone buzzed again. Gideon. He arrived 20 minutes later without coat, without entourage, without answers, prepackaged. He sat at the table where the girls ate cereal and did puzzles, the hum of the refrigerator filling the space between them. I can secure an apartment, he said carefully. A benefit. Market-based, subsidized, lawful. Close to the school and the foundation. Maris didn't answer immediately. She looked at the door to the girls' room, listening to the soft rhythm of their sleep. I don't want them to think kindness costs your home, she said. Gideon nodded. I don't want that either. Silence stretched. Not awkward. Honest. I'll consider it, Maris said finally, but not alone. Gideon waited. I have conditions, she continued. Not demands. conditions. His eyes lifted attentive. I'm listening. Maris folded the notice once more precise. If we move, we don't move alone. Gideon's breath stilled. She spoke evenly. There are families here who won't land on their feet. Elderly neighbors, kids with schools across the street. If the foundation can help us, it can help them through structure, not charity theater. Gideon leaned back, not retreating, considering. You're asking to expand the solution. I'm asking to make it real, Maris replied. From the hallway, Ivy stood unseen, listening. She pressed her palm to the wall like she was measuring how much strength it held. That night, the city outside grew too quiet, and something decisive took shape. Morning came gray and deliberate, the kind of morning that didn't rush anyone but still arrived on time. Maris walked the girls to school as usual. Ivy counted steps. Luna waved at the crossing guard like it mattered. At Brightwell, the courtyard buzzed with polished ease, but Maris felt different now, less tentative, more anchored. She watched Ivy hand Luna her mittens without being asked. She watched Luna whisper something that made Ivy nod. At the foundation, Maris didn't wait for permission. She drafted a proposal the way she did everything else. Clean lines, lawful language, human outcomes. Housing security as a program, not a favor. Eligibility criteria, safeguards, community continuity. A plan that didn't save face, it saved time. Gideon read it in silence. Nolan stood by the window, impressed despite himself. You're not asking for apartments, Gideon said slowly. You're asking for a framework. Yes, Maris replied. So this doesn't depend on who we are or who you are. Gideon closed the folder, then opened it again. He picked up a pen, paused, and added a single line at the bottom in his own hand. Program Director Maris Hart. Dedicated budget. Independent oversight. He slid it back. Lead it. Maris stared at the page, breath caught not from surprise but from recognition. This changes the board. It should, Gideon said. That's the point. Later that day, the board convened. Grant Wycliffe arrived composed, already prepared to caution restraint. Nadine Kessler read the addendum twice, then looked up at Maris with a quiet smile. This is how institutions learn, Nadine said. By being taught. Grant's voice was measured. We must consider precedent. Gideon answered calmly. Precedent is only dangerous when it reveals what we avoided. The vote passed not unanimously, but decisively. That evening, Maris returned home with the news folded neatly in her bag. Ivy was lining up shoes again. Luna was taping drawings to the fridge. We're moving, Maris said gently. But we're not leaving people behind. Luna's face brightened. So houses can come with us in a way, Maris smiled. Yes. Ivy stepped forward, eyes serious. Is it okay if I'm not scared now? Maris pulled her close. It's more than okay. Across the city, Gideon stood alone in his office, looking at the skyline like it was finally speaking a language he understood. He reached into a drawer and touched the folded sandwich wrapper, then closed it again. The map had been redrawn, and it included people, not just lines. The move happened on a Saturday chosen carefully so school routines wouldn't fracture. Boxes were labeled clearly. Nothing was rushed. Nothing was hidden from the girls. The new building stood on a quieter street, brick, warm with age, windows open to air that felt steadier. Families arrived in staggered turns, neighbors from Seabrook Row, stepping into new doorways, with the same furniture, the same habits, the same dignity. Mrs. Calderon from 3B hugged Maris with relief she tried not to show. The Nguyen family carried plants up the stairs, laughing at the elevator that moved too slowly. Continuity arrived disguised as logistics. Inside the apartment, Ivy claimed a corner by the window. This can be the thinking place, she announced. Luna immediately declared the rug a reading island. Gideon arrived later, quietly standing back, as if space itself deserved respect. He watched the girls settle without ceremony, watched Maris direct boxes with the calm authority of someone who knew where everything belonged. At Brightwell, the shift was subtle but real. Dr. Ashford's tone softened not in apology, but in recalibration. Miss Rowan Hale smiled openly now, pride undisguised. Parents noticed the Foundation's programs, the headlines that followed the way generosity could be organized, without being sanitized. At the Foundation, Maris's program launched with clarity. Mobile clinics rolled out on schedule. Housing support partnered with legal aid. Outcomes were tracked. Lives stabilized. The work spoke for itself. One evening, weeks later, Gideon joined the girls at the kitchen table. Luna read aloud, stopping to explain every other sentence. Ivy listened, chin in her hands, absorbing the room. "You're different now," Luna observed, looking at Gideon. He smiled. "How so? You don't look lost," she said. Ivy added quietly, "You look like you're standing." Gideon swallowed. "That might be because you taught me how." Maris watched them, the scene settling into her like something earned, not gifted. There was no fairy tale ending, only a practiced steadiness that felt better than magic. On the fridge, Ivy taped a new drawing beside the old one. 2 stick figures again, but this time a line beneath them. "We didn't leave. We expanded. The city outside continued its work, building, changing, pressing forward. Inside, something held. And for the first time, it felt like it would last." The signs didn't arrive all at once. They came the way truth often does, softly, then persistently. Gideon Vale missed a meeting, then another. When he did appear, he stayed near the door hands, tucked into his pockets, as if warmth had become something to ration. He listened more than he spoke. When he smiled, it faded too quickly. Maris noticed before anyone said anything. Nurses always did. At a Foundation briefing, she caught the slight hitch in his breath when he stood. The pause before he answered a simple question. The way his eyes searched for a chair like it was permission. "You look tired," Luna said later that evening, stating it the way children state weather. Gideon laughed it off. "That happens when you forget lunch." Ivy studied him, quiet as ever. She noticed the tremor he tried to hide with stillness. The call came on a Sunday morning. Nolan's voice was steady but not calm. He collapsed during a board session. Exhaustion complicated by pneumonia. "He's stable. He's at Crown Harbor General." Maris didn't ask questions she already knew the answers to. "Is he accepting visitors?" A pause. He asked about the girls. 2 hours later, Maris and the twins stood outside a private room. The hallway smelled like antiseptic and patience. Ivy held Luna's hand thumb, rubbing circles the way Maris did when she needed to ground herself. Inside, Gideon looked smaller, not weak, just human. Oxygen tubing traced his cheek. Machines hummed with the quiet confidence of doing their job. "Hello, Blue Eyes," Luna said gently, as if loudness might tip something over. Gideon smiled. "Hello, Reading Island." They brought a paper bag, nothing extravagant. Soup, warm and ordinary. A card with uneven letters. A drawing of 3 stick figures standing under a roof with a heart in the middle. "Ivy drew the roof," Luna explained, "so it doesn't fall." Gideon's eyes softened. "That's very thoughtful." Maris spoke with the attending physician, professional, respectful. No demands, just clarity. Recovery would require rest, nutrition, consistency. The kind of care staff provided expertly but not continuously. Back at the bedside, Ivy asked the question she had been holding. "Who takes care of you when you go home?" Gideon hesitated. "I have people." Ivy nodded slowly. "People are good, but they go home." The truth landed without accusation. Maris felt it too, the space where support should be. "We can help," she said carefully, "if you're willing to accept it." Gideon looked at the girls, at Maris, at the ceiling like it might give him an answer. Then he exhaled. "I am." The city outside kept moving. Inside the room, strength went quiet and something steadier took its place. Gideon's penthouse had always been impressive. It had never been lived in. The first morning of recovery changed that. Maris arrived early, grocery bags in hand, moving through the kitchen with the ease of someone who understood purpose. She didn't comment on the unused appliances or the spotless counters. She put a pot on the stove and let soup do what soup had done for generations. Ivy set books on the coffee table, carefully stacked. Luna taped her drawing to the fridge with permission. "Is this okay?" Luna asked. Gideon nodded. "It's perfect." Routine arrived without ceremony. Mornings brought vitals and quiet breakfasts. Afternoons brought schoolwork at the long dining table that finally learned the sound of pencils. Evenings brought meals, eaten slowly, conversations allowed to wander. Gideon followed instructions not because he was told to, but because he trusted who was telling him. "Drink," Maris said. "Yes, ma'am," he replied, smiling. As days passed, color returned. The cough softened. The tremor eased. Something else changed, too. The apartment filled with evidence of presence. Books left open. Shoes by the door. A calendar with handwritten notes. One afternoon, Ivy sat beside Gideon on the couch, reading silently. "You don't have to sit here," he said. "I know," she replied. "I'm choosing." Luna read aloud nearby, pausing often to explain the story in her own words. Gideon listened like it mattered. Because it did. "I used to think success meant control," he said quietly to Maris one evening. "That if I managed everything, nothing would hurt." Maris stirred the pot. Control doesn't prevent loss. Connection softens it. Later that night, Gideon found the folded sandwich wrapper in his desk drawer. He brought it out and placed it on the table. "I kept this," he admitted, "because it reminded me of what I forgot." Luna studied it. "It's just paper." Gideon smiled. "It used to be." The penthouse learned new sounds: laughter, disagreement, the clink of dishes. It learned how to be interrupted. It learned how to breathe. And Gideon learned something else. Recovery wasn't a return to who he had been. It was permission to become someone new. By the third week, Gideon no longer needed reminders to rest. He needed reminders not to work. "Not yet," Maris said, taking the tablet from his hands. "You heal first. The world will wait." He smiled, unbothered. "It can." One evening, as rain traced slow paths down the windows, the girls worked on a puzzle at the table. Gideon watched them, something unguarded in his expression. "My daughter would be about your age," he said quietly. Ivy didn't ask questions. She listened. She loved books, Gideon continued. She believed stories fixed things. Luna looked up. "They don't fix. They help." Gideon nodded. "Yes, they help." Later, Ivy taped a new note to the fridge below the others. "You are not invisible." Gideon stood there a long time after the girls went to bed. The next morning, he walked them to school, slowly bundled properly, obeying instructions. Parents noticed. Not the billionaire, but the man holding two small hands, listening to a story about a missing sock like it was urgent. At the foundation, Maris's programs showed results. At Brightwell, resistance softened into adjustment. Systems learned to accommodate what they couldn't dismiss. When Gideon returned to work, it was with boundaries. He left meetings on time. He ate lunch. He kept the house open. On a quiet afternoon, Gideon and Maris stood on the balcony overlooking the city. "I didn't know how lonely I was," he said, "until your daughters treated me like I wasn't." Maris answered honestly. "Loneliness doesn't always look like being alone." Inside, Ivy and Luna laughed over a book, the sound drifting out like proof. Gideon turned to Maris. "Thank you for staying." She met his gaze. "Thank you for letting us." Below them, the city continued, imperfect, unfinished, full of people trying. Above it, in one apartment that had learned how to hold a life, healing reached places medicine couldn't. The morning of the opening arrived clear and quiet, as if the city itself had agreed to hold its breath. The building stood near the water, sunlight catching on glass and stone in a way that felt intentional. Not grand, purposeful, a place designed to welcome rather than impress. A banner hung across the entrance, still covered by a white cloth. Inside, people gathered: doctors, nurses, community workers, donors, families who rarely stood in rooms like this. Conversations overlapped, then softened, then paused. Maris stood near the back with Ivy and Luna, each girl holding one of her hands. Ivy wore a simple blue dress, hair, neatly brushed, posture straight. Luna's shoes were already scuffed. She hummed softly, eyes moving everywhere at once. Gideon waited near the stage jacket, buttoned, breathing steady. Health had returned to his face, but something else had changed too. He no longer filled rooms by force of presence. He filled them by listening. When the ceremony began, the applause was polite, expected. Speeches followed, carefully written, professionally delivered. Then Gideon stepped forward. "This center exists because of loss," he said evenly. "But it lives because of connection." He spoke of early diagnosis, access, dignity. He spoke of systems that failed quietly and systems that could learn. Then he paused. "There is one more truth," he continued. "One that reshaped everything we built here." Maris felt Ivy's hand tighten slightly. 4 years ago, Gideon said 2 5-year-old girls shared their only sandwich with a man they thought was homeless. A ripple moved through the room. "They didn't know who I was," he said. "They didn't know what I owned. They didn't know what that moment would become." He turned slightly toward the girls. They only knew someone was cold. The cloth fell. The name revealed itself in clean, understated letters: the Saffron and Heart Pediatric Care Center. Maris inhaled sharply. This name had not been discussed. Luna gasped. "Mom, that's us." Ivy didn't speak. She just stared, eyes wide, absorbing the weight of being seen. Gideon's voice softened. "This center carries my daughter's name," he said, "and it carries theirs. Not because they are special, but because what they did was." The applause this time wasn't polite. It was real. The microphone was lowered. Not to dramatize, to listen. Ivy stepped forward first, careful, composed. Luna followed, fearless. The room settled, not because someone asked it to, but because everyone understood something important was about to happen. Ivy spoke softly. "My name is Ivy Hart," she said. "This is my sister Luna." Luna waved. "We didn't know he was rich," Ivy continued. "We didn't know he was important." Luna leaned toward the microphone. "We just thought he was cold." A few people laughed quietly, others didn't. "My mom taught us," Ivy said, "that kindness isn't something you earn. It's something you choose." Luna added, "And you don't have to have a lot to choose it." They stood there, 2 children, steady and unafraid. "We were hungry that day," Ivy said, "but we weren't alone." Luna nodded, so it was okay. No tears, no plea, no performance. Just truth. From the side of the room, Maris pressed her fingers together, grounding herself. She had taught them to be kind. She hadn't taught them how powerful that kindness could be. Gideon watched the girls as if the world had narrowed to their height. When they finished, the silence lasted a moment longer than expected. Then the room stood. Not because it was scripted, because it felt wrong not to. Later, as guests mingled, people approached Maris not with pity, not with curiosity, but with respect. Nurses thanked her. Parents asked questions. Community workers spoke of plans. Dr. Ashford approached last. "Your daughters," she said carefully, "have changed the tone of our school." Maris replied gently. "They didn't change it. They revealed it." That evening, back at home, Ivy removed her shoes neatly. Luna flopped onto the couch. "Was that scary?" Luna asked. Ivy thought for a moment. "No, it was heavy." Maris smiled. "You carried it well." On the fridge, Luna taped a new drawing. A building, open doors, people walking in. Above it, uneven letters: "Everyone can come in." The city returned to its rhythm. The center opened fully. Children arrived. Parents waited without fear of cost. Nurses moved quickly, carefully. Early diagnoses caught what once slipped by unnoticed. The work began. At the foundation, systems shifted. Not dramatically, but permanently. Programs were measured by lives stabilized, not headlines earned. At Brightwell, generosity became less controversial when it became visible. Structure followed kindness instead of containing it. One evening, Gideon stood on the balcony with Maris, the city lights steady below them. "You didn't save me because I was rich," he said quietly. "You saved me because you didn't know I was." Maris nodded. They didn't see wealth. They saw a person. Inside, Ivy and Luna lay on the floor with books spread around them. Mom, Luna called. "Is tomorrow normal?" Maris smiled. "Yes." Ivy looked up. "Normal's good." Later after bedtime, Gideon noticed something on the fridge. A small note written carefully. "You are not invisible." He stood there longer than necessary. Years from now, people would tell the story differently. They would say a billionaire changed lives. They would point to a building, a foundation, a name on glass. But the truth would always be quieter. It began with two small hands, one last sandwich, and a sentence no system could improve. "We can be hungry together." And in that moment, without knowing it, they saved more than one life. They reminded the world how to see. Did this story leave a lasting impression on you? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment, rate it from 1 to 10, and tap the end screen to see another heartwarming story waiting for you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, then tap the bell icon so you don't miss any new stories. Until our next story.